Hello and welcome to the Fresh Air Sci-Fi Show. I'm Joe.
And I'm inspiring Ray philosophy.
I do apologise for starting the stream a little bit late tonight. I was having a mix, and I just wanted to carry on playing.
I was enjoying it.
Maybe we should do a free for all at one point where I have it going in the background. I have two streams going. One's the mix, and one's it low down going to this one. And then people can either join in on either stream. Might be fun.
We need to set up an Answers and Reason radio station on the Discord.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I mean, I used to do the whole internet radio thing. It was a good laugh back in the day. Started off promoting unsigned artists and stuff like that, and doing various music reviews, and it was going really, 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 really well. And then life happened, and lots of things changed, and we started. I mean, I wasn't as good as a presenter, and we didn't have as many views. We didn't have as many regular shows. I was too busy. I mean, I used to put like 20 to 40 hours a week into my show, and doing that plus working full time and family and all of that, it got too much, and so I got a bit lazy, and then my shows felt really recycled. So it would definitely be good to do that sort of thing there.
Yeah, I mean, you could just, like, when you're bored, go into one of the chat channels and do a bit of a mix.
Yeah, it'd be awesome. But of course, that's not what we're here to discuss tonight. No, tonight
on topic. What?
No, tonight we're covering off. So the title of the stream is "Atheists Questioning Questions for Atheists." The reason for that is, well, Dave and I actually quite enjoy answering those videos, and we've done some written responses, and they've been quite interesting, and we've done some answers from both atheists and theists on YouTube, and we've done video responses to it, and they've been quite fun to do as well. But sometimes you see atheists complain about these videos as well. Now, one of the things that sort of inspired the idea for doing this stream a little while ago was a comment from Paul Ogier, who was saying, can we just all agree that we atheists are no longer going to respond to these 8 questions for atheist videos that are just there to promote their channel, or something like that. I mean,
that was it.
And I did actually respond. Didn't get a response, saying, well, I quite like doing them. Generally, they're quite fun. I don't really care if I send some traffic to their channel. If it's a good video, then it deserves a bit of traffic to it. No problem. If it's taking traffic away from me, taking viewers away from, I don't care. Why does it matter? Why does it matter to you? And I don't think that all of these videos are purely designed for that sort of thing. But looking at some of the questions, and especially the ones where we responded to the 36 questions for atheists, there was definitely a tone there, wasn't there, Dave?
Oh, yeah, definitely. It wasn't about getting to understand what atheists think or reasons why they don't believe. It was more sort of, you can't answer this question, but I can. So, and they weren't really designed to elicit responses, but to kind of make the theist look a bit better, like, well, I have an answer for this, and look, these people can't answer it.
Yeah, exactly. It was essentially trying to throw, as you say, questions you can't answer, which they'd then fill with God, or complete gotchas as well. Just yeah. And there can be a tone to these questions. There definitely can be. And I don't think those sorts of videos or questions on blogs or whatever are particularly helpful. You even see blog posts going around going, if you're talking to an atheist, ask them these questions, you'll get them, and blah, 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 blah. It's like, well, is your goal really to get people? Because generally, if you go in like that, you're not actually going to get anyone.
No, you're just going to piss them off. And if your goal is to actually convince them to believe in your God, going, I've outsmarted you, isn't the way to do it.
No, definitely not. As we mentioned a number of times when we've been talking to fellow atheists who are trying to convince theists not to be theists anymore, when changing a mind, respect matters. Talking down to them, pointing out that they're stupid because of blah blah, is not going to help. And it's the same for theists as well. If you've got a list of questions that you think are amazing gotchas and are going to show how stupid you atheists are, you're not going to get very far. And in fact, especially with how on the internet, how trigger happy some of us atheists are with the whole fallacies, the second you fill a gap of knowledge with, well, God did it, that's the end of the conversation. Well, that's a God of the gaps fallacy, you're not worth talking to.
Special pleading, yeah. And once you trigger that kind of response, that determines how the rest of the conversation is pretty much going to go.
So the first thing I would say is forget about the gotcha questions. They're not worth doing. I'd say that it's really good to try and understand why the atheist believes what they believe. Why don't you accept this evidence? What about the Bible doesn't convince you? And those sorts of questions are ones that you can have a good conversation about. Now, you might still get some sardonic, patronizing twat, and you know what? Move on from that conversation as well, because you're not going to get it. But some of us atheists actually like to have the conversation. Now, we responded to the last 2 years of the Trinity Radio's 10 Questions for Atheists, because they were half-decent questions. He seemed like he was asking them honestly. He seemed like, he was being genuine with the questions, that he really wanted to know why. That they weren't purely an apologetics tool. Now, don't get me wrong, he would respond to the videos and go, well, I don't accept this because of da-da-da-da-da. But actually, that can be the start of a conversation. So forget the actual videos for a second. Think about explaining your position to someone, or having them explain it to you, and just discussing all the points between it. It has a much more positive effect. You build a rapport with each other. You're more inclined to listen to each other, gain that understanding of each other, and all of a sudden, you're in an ability where you can at least learn something. You can learn why they believe what they believe. You might realize that actually you have some misunderstandings about them. You might have thought, like we often see some of us atheists assuming that all Christians are literalists, which is crazy, and they've proved the Bible wrong because it's not literally true in every part, and you're like, but yeah, theists have similar ones like that too, and again, not helpful to the conversation.
Absolutely. I'll go back to the one I usually use. Dr. Lane Craig is a pretty respected philosopher as such within philosophy or religion. Not in apologetics mode, obviously, but his philosophy is good. And most people will write off anything William Lane Craig has to say before it's even said. And they won't listen to what he has to say because they don't respect him. But if you think about somebody like Ron Ra, who can make bad arguments, and people will lap it up, and it's because they respect him.
Exactly. And in fact, I think, speaking of William Lane Craig, they would be more inclined to listen to him if he didn't go on these full apologetics tilts. I think that's why they don't have the respect for him. I mean, if you talk to a theist who doesn't go into full apologetics mode, actually, you can have a really good conversation. You may come away from the conversation going, well, no, I don't agree with you, but you might have something to think about and to look into and consider, and maybe you'll do the same back to them. But you're right. I mean, William Lane Craig, we just no one really respects him because he goes full apologist mode and agrees with people like Ben Shapiro.
Yeah, that doesn't help his credibility at all.
Not at all. I mean, we did a video on that recently, and it was just one of those things where you're just like, really, Bill? No.
I mean, if you think about it, it's sort of his business too. Like, it's where he gets his money from, so it's understandable that he plays to that crowd.
Yeah, I mean, that's a shame. And I understand why there's then this fear with videos, especially for YouTube channels that are theistic, that do make their money, through their apologetics videos. Because you're instantly going to assume that they are doing this for reasons that are not genuine. And it can be hard to spot when they are genuinely asking the questions, and it can be easy to be mistaking one way or the other. But Dave, do you have any tips for how you can spot someone that seems to be an honest actor, a good faith actor?
That's kind of a difficult question.
That's why I left it to you.
Yeah, thanks. I think one of the ways is that they're actually trying to engage with what you believe. They're actually asking questions to try and get it, what you believe and why you believe it. I get a lot of videos that pop up in my YouTube feed as recommended, where it's atheists responding to like the lowest common denominator versions of these. And you can tell that they're not asking the questions genuinely because they're asking a question on a subject they don't particularly understand and asking awkward questions that seem to be not, why do you believe this? Or, what makes you not believe this? They'll say, well, if there's no God, then how did humans get here? And that, it shows a complete lack of why the atheist might, and they're not even asking why the atheist believes evolution or anything like that. They're asking the same recycled question that they think is a gotcha, or, well, if the universe is infinite, then how did it start? And a better question would be something like, well, if you believe the universe is infinite and you don't think God solves the problem, why don't you think God solves the problem? Or how do you solve the problem?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Actually, Luke's piped up in the channel for saying that there is another way to do it as well. He says they will accept your argument as your argument. They don't say, nope, what you actually believe is. And that is a really, really good point. And actually, it's something both theists and atheists do. Honestly, the number of times I get frustrated with some atheists who tell theists what they believe is, because you believe this, you also believe that. And no, you haven't asked them. You say you could phrase it differently. If you believe this, then do you also? But don't assume their position.
And I mean, I suppose to sort of counter that one a little, or to expand on it a bit, I suppose you could say that if you ask a person what they believe and they tell you, you can say, well, that logically and rationally entails this position. Do you accept this position? As long as you can make that logical and rational argument and show that entailment, of course. But simply blurting out, well, that if you believe this, you must believe X, isn't quite the same as showing that logical entailment.
And the flip side, if they can then have, you got to listen back. And if they say, well, no, actually, I think if you think about it this way, then it doesn't necessarily entail that. It could also entail this. You have to listen and accept that maybe they believe that thing for those reasons. And they could be right. It might not actually logically entail that. It might seem that way. And I think on both sides, again, we get stuck in these patterns. One of the most common ones that we hear on both sides is if there's no God, then morality is subjective, so therefore morality is subjective. And that's what both atheists and theists say. Secular morality doesn't have to be subjective.
No.
And there's a reason quite a lot of ethicists are moral realists. And you have to think that the people that specialize in this probably have a better idea to the average person on the street, well, you know, what they're talking about in regards to these sorts of things. So there isn't necessarily that logical entailment, yet both theists and atheists quite often see this logical entailment that if there's no God, then morality is subjective, and the atheists will go, well, therefore morality must be subjective.
Yeah. And I think that's another, like the way you put that, it's another good way of showing that the questions are honest. When people are doing that and just repeating these catchphrases, they've obviously not thought about it. And they probably asked, if it's a general question like that, it's probably been asked and answered 100 times. So they don't really need to be asking it because the answers are out there. And this goes for both sides.
Yeah, I mean, saying that, I think Steen says something along those lines. Imagine having had the same discussion 1,000 times and then going through it again. I think some people try to skip to the point they want, but forget to bring others with them. And I think that's a really, really good point. You know, you might see that there's this logical entailment, but if you don't lead the other person to that logical entailment, then you know they're not going to be with you on this path. You're going to start talking past each other. And actually, you might find someone who has a good answer for why that logical entailment isn't actually the only option. There might be 2 options, there might be 3, there might be 4. And actually, everyone you've spoken to up till this point might not have really thought about it that well. And this person you're speaking to now might be really well versed on the topic and have answers you haven't heard before. You've got to go into each conversation treating everyone as intelligent. You know, regardless of whether they're theist or atheist or whatever label that they prefer to have. Like, treat everyone as an intelligent being. And if you realize that actually maybe they're not, leave the conversation.
Yeah. I mean, this is something I'll say about the atheist and the theist side as well. A lot of them go in with the approach that the other side is mentally ill or willfully ignorant. You know, the only reason they believe what they believe is because they're ignorant. I mean, we had the comment at the start of the live stream. Go watch Inspiring Philosophy, and if you don't agree with them, you're willfully ignorant. That's not a logical entailment. Do you know what I mean? It's.
Let me see if I can find that one and put it up on screen. Yeah, there you go. It was see Inspiring Philosophy's videos if you're really concerned with finding the truth. If his videos don't convince you, then you're all just being willfully ignorant.
I mean, that's not the case. Because you don't believe somebody or agree with them, that doesn't mean you're willfully ignorant. It just means you don't agree with them. I mean, it could be a million different reasons. You could be versed in different topics. You could have different ideas about the topic. You just might not be convinced. I mean, being convinced of something isn't pure rationality. There's an emotional level to it as well. And I think both sides go in, and in any good discussion, like you said, you can't go in thinking the other side is willfully ignorant or mentally ill or anything like that, because you've already doomed the conversation from the start.
No. And I mean, we even see plenty of atheists who are willfully ignorant when we're having discussions from them as well. But you can tell that through the conversation. You know, they ask about questions. I mean, whether you're with a theist or an atheist or whatever, and you say, you know, look at this material, and tell me what you think the problems with it are, if they go and read it and come back to it and can justify why they don't accept it, then fine. You know, they're not being willfully ignorant. They just don't agree with that material for whatever reason. Yeah. But if they refuse to check the material in the first place, which is what happens on Twitter a lot, especially when I'm trying to explain morality to a fellow atheist, they'll go, well, no, tell me why you think it here. And you end up writing these things. You go, it would be much easier explained. I'm happy to have a conversation with you, but if you don't want a conversation, I've got these articles and there's these videos. I've got this PDF, and it all explains these things. Here's these references on SEP. Here's this, here's that. You know, there's a lot of material. You can't really have this conversation effectively on Twitter, but if you want to try, then here's some basic things. Yeah, well, I just don't accept what you're saying. It's like, okay, did you check any of the resources? No, I'm not going to check those resources. Okay. Yeah. You want me to break down the entirety of morality that I know, which isn't the entirety of morality. There's still a hell of a lot for me to learn. There really is. And the more I keep unraveling it, the more I go, fuck. I thought I was done with this bit. I thought I was done with this bit, but now I've gone into this bit. There's all this stuff. I bet when I get to each block on this bit, there's going to be all that stuff again. And that's the way it goes. And when you're having these conversations with people on Twitter, you do see that they just want these incredibly complex and nuanced topics broken down into 280 character tweets. And even if you start doing multi-tweets to try and explain it, they just won't listen.
Yeah. And before we carry on, what you've said actually raises quite a good point when it comes to these questions for atheists. And even say questions for theists, I don't really see them very much. I know, we've got one coming up, but I don't really see that much from atheists. But when the theist asks these questions, they have to remember that most people haven't really thought of their ideas and views in that sort of way. They've picked up ideas and taken them on board because they seem to fit with what they believe. They're a part of the kind of groupthink. And I don't mean that in a rude way. I just mean that there's a lot of common beliefs that float around within any group, and people just pick them out of the air and put them in their head. And they think, well, if all these other people think this, then there must be something to it. And when you ask a question, or in the theist ask questions and questions for atheists, they should sort of consider that a lot of people, including probably the theist asking the question, especially in more lowest common denominator, most people haven't thought of their beliefs in any great detail. They've just adopted them.
No, that's a really good point, actually. I think we do see that a lot with a lot of the conversations that I have. And do you know what? Until I started looking into some of these things to a deeper level, I was one of them. There is a lot of topics that, I mean, it's coming back to like your video on Dunning-Kruger again. There's a lot of times where we don't have much of an understanding of a topic, so we think we know everything about that topic, or at least most of it, and there isn't that much more that we can learn. And everyone in our echo chamber is saying exactly the same thing. And we atheists are not immune to echo chambers and the Dunning-Kruger effect. And you're right. I mean, a lot of the time when it is theist versus atheist, you're both coming from different echo chambers and have only heard the same ideas recycled round and round and round. And you haven't, got that, what's the word I'm looking for? You haven't got as much of a context as you should have to be having these conversations that you're having. And it's fine having an opinion on something, but the second someone goes, well, have you seen this? Have you read that? Do you understand much about so-and-so? That's when you need to look into it a bit more, or maybe actually go, no, I'm a bit ignorant about this, but I can't be bothered to look into it. And that's fine. Do you know what? If you're genuinely honest with the fact that you don't care enough about the conversation to have it, that's fine. But then don't get involved in those conversations in the first place.
That's it. Or sit back and read the conversation and learn from the conversation rather than jump in and go, well, you know what? I have this idea. I'm smart. Your idea doesn't match mine, so you all must be stupid.
And that happens a lot. And again, that happens on both sides.
Oh, yeah.
Very, 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 very much so. It's...
That's one of the reasons why I have respect for theists that call out other theists and say, look, what you're arguing is bad. Like Randall Rouser.
Yes.
He's fantastic in doing stuff like that. He'll call out both sides.
He actually did that to that Daniel guy, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
And that Daniel guy just didn't listen. But then we sort of have the same thing when we call out our fellow atheists as well. And yeah, a lot of people are stuck in these things. And because everybody else in that circle is saying those same things, then that must be right. It's unfortunate. Very unfortunate. Yeah. And it's all Philip's fault, you know.
Usually.
Yeah. In fact, as they say in the chat, you know, Luke blames Philip, and Icarus blames Philip for absolutely everything. Netflix is down, it's Philip's fault. Too many live streams, Philip's fault. According to whom? Philip's fault. That well, I know we was.
Yeah. Well, I know we never live stream until Philip came along, so it's definitely his fault.
And he's not even here tonight. Philip's fault. So there are a few ways that you can detect if people are being honest actors. It can be a little bit harder in these like 10 questions for atheist videos. The reason for that is all you've got is them talking at you. It's monological. Yeah. You can't really tell their intentions until they do a response video or respond to your comments or anything like that. And that can make it a bit harder to judge. It's not the same as a live conversation. But I think that the way some of the questions are phrased helps you. You know, you can sort of tell if they're going for a gotcha or not. If they're more open-ended and like, you know, tell me why you believe what you believe, I think that's a good indicator that they're asking them honestly.
Yeah.
They might have a bias. They might hear your response and go, well, that sounds like bullshit. But they at least can have that conversation with you from there if they want to. And you might be able to watch their response and listen to why they justify that they don't accept your response. And equally, if they don't just sit there and go, well, that's a load of shit, and actually do take the time to justify why they don't accept your idea and why they think theirs is right, again, they're still acting in good faith. It's just they have different answers.
Yeah. And I think some questions that might be deemed as gotcha questions, like they might not necessarily be gotcha questions. They might be looking for a way to find inroads to have an actual conversation with you. Like Braxton Hunter. In his first one, he asked a couple of questions where people are like, that's a gotcha question. You're not going to get me. But my sense that I got from it was more that he was like with the question of, is there any evidence that you find good? And most people just responded with, no, there's no evidence. But I think sort of what he was attempting to do was look for a way to have conversations or future videos where he could say, well, look, this is how I see that evidence and why I think that is for God. So I think there's that as well. You can mistake a genuine question for a gotcha question. But I think in a lot of cases, tone can matter, especially if it's cushioned in with all the other questions. If it's prefaced by 4 gotcha questions, chances are the 5th one is going to be a gotcha question as well, even if it sounds like it might be slightly honest.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you there. Like you're saying with Braxton's, none of them really came across to me as gotcha questions, but because he was a little bit tongue-in-cheek and cheeky in his first video that he did, which I would have seen as a good sense of humour, and I engaged with and I quite enjoyed, but there were some atheists that were like, oh yeah, you're just putting us down, and so on and so forth. They didn't respond kindly to it. And I think in that regard, it can be hard, I suppose, when you're trying to talk to an audience that is different to yours.
Not just that, talk to an audience that you know is probably going to be hostile to whatever you say.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, you mentioned it briefly earlier, but we've got a 10 Questions for Theists video coming out. It was supposed to come out right after the stream, but due to some technical difficulties, problem in chair,
Philip's fault.
It will be a little bit later, either this evening or I'll release it tomorrow. I've tried to just be quite plain with the questions, like not try and be cheeky or funny or anything like that, because it's a different audience, and it's an audience that could be quite hostile, as you say, as you saw from the first person that jumped in to the thing. You know, the second you mention theism or you try and talk about the Kalam or anything like that, our channel gets bombarded by theists who are going, oh, you're just fucking idiots. And you're like, well, that's not the good way to have the conversation. Now, here's a comment that, from Louis. Is it Louis or is it Lewis? I tend to see that name and go Louis. But please correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't like being wrong, and I'm wrong so often. It would be nice to be right about one thing. He says, what you say about atheist and theist echo chambers is true, but there's a difference. The atheist echo reflects a sound and thoughtful mind, while the theists the hum of a stifled thoughts. See, I would disagree with you there.
I absolutely would disagree with you there, considering the discussion that I had with Randolph this afternoon.
Yes. Oh my God, that conversation with Randolph. Okay, so it is Lewis. Sorry. So I've got a friend whose name is spelled exactly the same as yours, and he pronounces it Louis. So it's yeah. Now, some atheist echo chambers, you could be right. They could be based on sound thinking, of course. Especially if you were in a room of evolutionary biologists and everything they're discussing, and they're an echo chamber to each other, but yeah, you could say there's a lot of evidence to back up their claims. But if you start talking to atheists about some of the very common things, I mean, think about the people that follow Ra with the whole rocks are atheist thing, and his bad takes on epistemology. Or you think about, as you mentioned earlier, Dave, Randolph's take on propositional logic.
And the law of excluded middle.
Yeah.
Being a black and white fallacy because it excludes third options.
And actually, I mean, as you know, Lewis, we're all atheists. Well, actually, we've just had LB. He's a practical atheist. But that aside, Dave's done a video that addresses a number of issues with the echo chambers, and there are lots of catchphrases that you'll hear some of us atheists saying. And we do try and address these bad takes on logic and reasoning and things like that. But there are a lot of commonly said catchphrases and memes and all of that go round and round and round. Like, the mental disorder. Theism is a mental disorder. That's a bad one. If there's no God, then morality is subjective. So morality has to be subjective because there's no God. The whole prove it, the whole not evidence, instead of taking the time to understand that actually there's different types of evidence. Just because it's not scientific evidence doesn't make it not evidence. And so on and so forth. But these things, when you try and address it in the atheist community, you'll get flamed for it. They'll go no, and then they'll retweet you, and you'll get dogpiled by this echo chamber who are all saying the same thing. So in that regard, I have to disagree with you that the atheist echo chamber always reflects a sound and thoughtful mind, especially on social media. I don't think it does. I think social media is actually quite often lowest common denominator type stuff. Do you have anything to add to that, Dave?
No, I think what you've said is pretty correct. And I think what Lewis has said highlights one of the problems, is that a lot of atheists come into this thing assuming that atheists must be rational because they've adopted this position where they don't believe in God. So that other person doesn't believe in God. Believing in God is what is irrational. Therefore, these people must be rational. So I think there's a bit of bias going on there, in-group bias, that stops a lot from going, well, it's my team that is the rational one. It's the other team that's irrational. Theists will be saying exactly the same thing, and you'll just be going, well, no, they're wrong because we're the rational ones.
Yeah. So he's followed it up saying perhaps theism is thought not to be a mental disorder because of the sheer number afflicted. It appears normal because of this. It doesn't fit the parameters for what a mental disorder is in psychology. I mean, talk to Luke. He's as in bearded heretic. There's a lot of problems with regarding theism as a mental disorder. I mean, think about it this way. What if, right, I suddenly turn around and go, and I think about it lots, and I just think, do you know what? Actually, I do think it more likely there is a God. I don't think it's necessarily any of the religions, but having thought about this in detail, maybe actually there is one. I can see how, various arguments have influenced me, and actually, now I think there is. Am I afflicted with a mental disorder just because I've suddenly reasoned that perhaps there is a God and I believe that there is a God, or at least I think it more likely that there is one than there isn't? I wouldn't say so. Now, don't get me wrong, theists can be mentally ill, but so can atheists. And again, regarding theism or atheism as a mental disorder, you're being derogatory about mental disorders. You're creating a stigma. And I don't think that's helpful either. Yes, you can think that theism in general is irrational, right? You need to listen to their justifications to truly find out why and if it is rational or irrational. But fair enough if you have a bit of a bias thinking that it's irrational. But is irrationality a mental disorder?
If it is, then pretty much everybody has a mental disorder, because as we learned from our stream on rationality, most people are irrational in some way.
Yeah, most definitely. And if you don't agree, it's fine because it's Philip's fault. Sorry, just catching up with the chat. Yes, the conversation with Randolph, that was also Philip's fault. Randolph's take on everything is worse than Aaron's, and that's fair. I mean, the thing is, I think Randolph is a really nice guy. He seems to.
I think he's performative.
Yeah, maybe he is, but he comes across in a nice way. But his takes on things are, I mean, he basically takes Aaron's bad ideas and adds to them.
Yeah. He's Aaron Raw with a nice front, like a a personality that doesn't come across as, well, I'm the football hooligan. He's the guy who's preparing you for the football hooligan.
LB says, Braxton's questions were legit. I think most of the atheists that hated it were either being too sensitive and overactive to what he was legit asking. I tend to agree with you there, LB. Yeah, I do think that they were legit. That's why we responded, and that's why we responded again. We wouldn't have done it a second time if we felt burned by it. And some of the responses from other atheists, they were terrible. Like, some of them, oh my God. It was, yeah. Apparently, though, God is a DJ. Which DJ? It's definitely not me, because if I was a god, I'd be a lot better at DJing. And, yeah.
It's clearly me. I have invisible DJ skills.
What about atheists who... Oh, so, hang on. Carrying on with it. It's a comment from you, Dave. What about atheists who do not believe there is no God?
Well, that Lewis said rational in the sense of believing there is no God, but there's a lot of atheists who say that being an atheist doesn't mean you believe there is no God. So are they rational too? If they do not believe that there is no God, and that's the baseline for rationality, then you're arguing that a lot of atheists aren't rational.
Yeah, that's fair. Icarus says, if theism was a mental disorder, it would be the first mental disorder that can be cured by reading the Bible. There's a lot going on in the chat as well. Luke is obviously talking much about like what we said about it stigmatizing mental disorder, and it's a really bad take. I really don't think that's a great way to go regarding it as a mental disorder. Cafe's jumped in. You're talking about Randolph Richardson. He's a philosophical lightweight. Yeah. Is it welterweight? The one below lightweight? Is that what it is?
He's a shadow boxer who gets beat up by his own shadow.
He actually did that in the conversation a few times. LB says, it goes back to what Dave said earlier. He's a Christian apologist, and most atheists on the internet think they are lying because Christianity is bullshit to them. And that's the thing, like we've been saying tonight, like if you come across these 10 questions for atheists, you need to act as if they're being honest and you're being honest. And it's the only way you're going to have a good conversation. And turning around and being narky about the questions or anything like that, it's really not going to get you very, very far at all. A video recommendation from Alan. He says, Ozzy's video is religion and mental disorder. You would have to be crazy to think so. Explains this why quite nicely. Now, he's an atheist that both Dave and I have a hell of a lot of respect for. And he is one of those people that can explain things in such a beautiful way. He is really, really, really good with his explanations. I would always advise checking out an Ozzy video. I wish he was still making them. He doesn't really do much at all. Apparently we're buffering a bit. Is that happening to everyone else, or is it just happening to Icarus? Either way, I think we know it's Philip's
I've got the video on screen. Well, I've got the video on screen and I've seen it happen twice.
Oh, really? See, this is funny. It's not happening my end at all. I'm not getting anything this end saying that we're lagging behind. Although we broadcast to Restream, and then Restream sends the stream out to Twitch and everything like that. So it could be that Restream are having buffering issues rather than it being us. It might be time for us to stop broadcasting to Twitch and everything as well, and just broadcast to YouTube.
I'm not sure we actually get any audience on Twitch.
No, every now and then one or two people jump up to say hello. But in general.
Also, hello, Philip.
Oh. He can confirm. It's his fault. Fair enough. Well, I do apologise for any buffering that is going on tonight. As I said, I can't see anything happening this end, so I can only think that it's restream. I'll check the stats after the stream and find out what it could be. So we've obviously had a little bit of discussion so far about how to try and detect honest actors when you're having these questions between theists and atheists. There's 10 questions from theists, there's 10 questions for theists and atheists. Sometimes it's by atheists, sometimes it's by theists.
Here's another way I think might be a good way to tell whether they're being genuine. If they're asking questions where the answers might challenge what they believe.
That is a very good point, because that's exactly the point you made at the end of your 36 questions for atheists. Your closing thoughts were, so there's my answers to the 36 questions. There were some interesting questions in there, but there are a lot of dishonest and just disingenuous questions here too. On the whole, I feel that the intent of the questions was not to engage atheists or honestly learn what atheists think, though I could be very wrong, of course. The one thing I did notice while answering the questions was a distinct lack of questions inquiring into why individuals might not believe in the questioner's God. There were several questions designed to make the atheist look bad, but not very much but very much a lack of why do you not believe in my God? The question, what would it take for you to believe in God, was a good start though. It's a shame that there were not more questions along those lines, ones designed to get at what the atheist believes about the questioner's God, as those are the important questions.
Yeah, and that's what I think. A lot of these 10 questions for atheists, or 5 questions for atheists, or whatever, are not so much designed to elicit that kind of conversation. They're not designed for, like, well, what are your criticisms about my God? Why don't you believe it? What stops you believing it? It's, here's this question you can't answer. I can put my God in there, so you should believe me.
Yeah. Yeah, and there are times when the atheist will say, I don't know. And I think it's good that we can say, I don't know. And I think it's a very honest position at times to take. Sometimes it might be, I don't know, but actually I'll start looking into that a bit more if we can. I think, it's fine being ignorant if you're willing to try and find an answer, or accept that it's something that you won't have an answer for, but justify your position.
Justify withholding belief.
Yes, exactly. Well, I mean,
here's an example I can give, and that's the problem of infinity before the universe. Those problems with positing an infinitely past physical universe, of course.
Yes.
And then the theist will say, well, my God can fix that because God is timeless, and therefore he can exist without an infinite past, and he can create, and it solves this infinite past problem. But for me, that doesn't solve the problem either, because I can't conceive of how a being with thoughts and a mind and who performs actions can exist in a timeless state.
Yeah, no, definitely. Comment that I've just noticed in the chat. 100 years ago, a man from today travelling back in time with a smartphone in his hand would be a god. Would appear as a god. They wouldn't actually be a god.
Well, no, not really, because there'd be no cell towers to connect to.
That's
no
true,
internet.
but they may well have, let's just say, music on their phone and be able to take pictures with their phone, at least whilst it held charge. Play music. So yeah, you'd have some information on there. You could download some stuff. There is a quote, I can't remember who it's by, but any species
Asimov.
with, was it Asimov, exceedingly advanced technology would appear like gods to a lesser species, a species with less advanced technology. And actually, that's one of the things that Stargate did quite well. The Goa'uld
Brilliant.
were gods, but they weren't actually gods. They just had really advanced technology that made it look like they had magic powers and all that sort of thing.
I hated the film, but loved the TV show.
Oh, yeah.
But I love that about the film, that getting into that sort of philosophical idea that the more advanced you are, the more godlike you appear.
Most definitely. And I think if what you're trying to say with that is, well, these stories from the Bible are just from a race from the future, or a race with high technology, I mean, you'd have to justify that as well.
Well, here's another thing to sort of put pay to that idea that we would appear like gods. What if somebody says, well, predict what's going to happen tomorrow to me, or create this thing, or do this magical thing? The most you could do is say, well, it's not up to you to question my power. So you wouldn't really appear like a god to them. You might appear as though you have extra powers, but
yeah, you wouldn't necessarily appear like a god. But if you go back far enough, where people worship the sun and things like that, and you produce fire from a lighter, that might actually seem like godlike to them because they are so unevolved at that
primitive
stage. Yeah, primitive, that's the word I was looking for. So I mean, in that regard, you can understand how if that sort of thing was to happen, then definitely. I think maybe 100 years ago is a bit too short in that regard.
Yeah.
Because you would have. There's plenty of science fiction that was coming out that they might have gone, see, I knew this would happen one day. Maybe it'd be better to say 1,000, 2,000 plus years ago.
Go back to Socrates' time. Yeah.
Right, Dave, I need a brief break. I will be about 1 minute, if not 2.
Yeah, no worries.
And I'm just going to put things in, be right back, and I will catch you guys in just a second. Thinking about where we're at with this, we've obviously had quite a discussion about trying to work out if someone is an honest actor, if the theists that are asking about these 10 questions for atheists are actually acting in good faith. And sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. And it can be hard to tell sometimes, especially when it is a video that's quite monological. But as Dave pointed out, sometimes the questions that they ask, especially if they are questions that could challenge their own beliefs, are present within that mix, because then they're really looking to challenge themselves and not just you. And if they're asking questions that are really trying to work out what you believe and why you believe it, and why you don't believe what they believe, there are some very, very good items. But other takes could be particularly bad. You know, they could be using the videos purely for apologetical tools. They could be trying to be complete gotchas. They could not be acting in good faith with these questions. So, from here, where do we go, Dave?
I suppose we could sort of discuss questions that would help improve that and would help dialogue. Like I said, if you ask a question about, well, I see that there's problems of the infinite regress, to bring up the example I put. in a physicalist universe or a materialist universe. I think God solves that problem. Why don't you think God solves that problem? Or to go back to what you were saying about the morality, where everyone just says, if there's no God, then everything is subjective. Rather than saying, well, if there's no God, then everything is subjective. How do you deal with morality? How do you solve problems of morality? Ask a question like, well, I think if God doesn't exist and all morality is subjective, how do you think we could solve disputes over what is moral in an atheistic framework?
I suppose even going further is, do you think that there's any moral truths? Because there's obviously non-cognitivist and, moral subjectivism. So on the cognitive side. So, and, if there is no truth to morality, then what do you think morality is? And there's lots of non-cognitive theories. And I don't agree with them. But they're interesting to read into, and I definitely need to read more. What about you guys out there? Do you think there's any good questions that theists could ask atheists? I think there's certain ones that depends on where the type of theist you're talking to, but I think questions about evolution can sometimes be good. If you're talking about, what is some of the strongest evidence for evolution? And you can be provided a number of links and studies to that. And it shows that there's someone that is actually interested in it. Or have you read the Bible in such a way that actually seems to indicate evolution happening in a metaphorical way? As well, because there are, depending on how you read it, and the thing with the Bible is it is quite open to interpretation, but if you can read it in certain ways, then you could actually say, well, it does seem to indicate that there is the way God is calling plant life and things forward. It could be allowing it to evolve naturally. He is the spark, if you will, but it then evolves naturally after that. And, I think there's certain things around that that can help broach the distinction, because quite often atheists think all theists don't accept evolution, but quite a lot do.
Well, here's another kind of suggestion that has kind of popped into my head. During his last 10 questions, Braxton Hunter asked something like, what are some of the Christian beliefs that you think are harmful? And what he was referring to was actually in Christian theology. But I think a better question would be, what beliefs that Christians hold do you think are harmful? And you can then break it down into groups of Christians. Like there's a whole bunch that are promoting anti-vax at the moment. During a pandemic, you could then say, well, look, this is something I find harmful coming from the Christian community. It might not be theologically based, but it's still based in the Christian community. Perhaps you could help us work towards solving this problem in the community.
That's a really good one. I think there's an interesting split there, though. It tends to be, rather than a theological side, it tends to be often a more conservative community that tends to be anti-vax, doesn't it? It just so happens that in America, the conservative community tends also to be quite Christian.
Yeah.
So it's a correlation. But and then they will lean on their faith to justify their anti-vaxxers. Well, Jesus will save me. Jesus never got vaccinated.
I mean, if you think about something like Christian Science, that's kind of harmful. Like to the person themselves, to the family, to whoever they bring into this idea, to the community. Now, they justify it through the Bible, but I'm not sure I could say that it is actually Christian theology as such. I don't know enough about it, but from what I can tell, I'm not really sure Jesus would say, don't go get help from the hospital. The idea seems to be more like, well, God has given us doctors to help us. Go see the doctor.
Mm.
And I think the questions aimed at getting at what we think is harmful from Christians, not Christianity as such, but Christians. These would be better questions.
Definitely. I mean, there's a comment that's come in from Lewis. It says, personally, there is no question a theist could ask me to have me consider the existence of a God. But that's not the point of these questions all the time. So what we're asking about, I mean, I think that the goal of these questions should actually be to build rapport, to understand someone else's position, and to try and, as I said, build rapport, but then have that dialogue and actually see where your differences are, but also see where your similarities are. Because apart from the things that can come out of a particular theology or religion, people can be quite a lot alike, actually. And there are some Christians that I think I get on with a hell of a lot more than some atheists. I've got a lot more in common with them. We disagree heavily on certain things. I mean, there's one person I met on Twitter who's a young earth creationist, right? I mean, I completely disagree with him about both the young earth and creationism, as well as, Christianity in general. But every conversation we have is great. We tend to leave those particular conversations because we know that we're not going to get anywhere with them, and actually have different conversations about various things of morality and the way we think people should be acting, and the pandemic and all of that. And actually, we're really in tune, apart from this very big thing. I mean, it is a very big thing. I can't get on board with the whole Earth being 6,000 years old and everything created from gold like that. It just, no. But I mean, that aside, we can have some great conversations. We can have some good questions. He will ask me the sort of questions that you're talking about, Dave. He might come up and say, what do you think about the pandemic? How do you think about people acting? And we'll have this conversation, and I'll say, well, how's it been in your camp? And he'll say, I'm really embarrassed by the way Christians are acting, the way they're being, oh yeah, Jesus will save me. He said, oh, what the hell are doctors for? God gave us these minds. Obviously, he's coming from a theological point, but God gave us these minds to have the doctors, to have the knowledge, to have the science, to come on with all these things. And that's why we've got the vaccinations and all the various distancing rules and so on and so forth. And I think that's what we're getting at, Lewis, is the fact that these questions shouldn't necessarily be things that make you consider the existence of God. The questions should be something that challenges you both.
I've just thought of a way to put it. When you just said the question shouldn't be about why you make the atheist challenge their own beliefs, the question should be about understanding how the atheist belief might challenge their own.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. Just catching up with the comments, sorry. So
that's all right.
Luke says, I think if a theist uses the questions to evangelize, it is dishonest. Why do you believe X when the Bible says, quote? Yes, no, I completely agree with you. That's a bad take. LB says he gets tired of debating the Bible. An atheist and a Christian will never shut up about it because two completely different viewpoints that will never agree. And I think that's the problem, because all the conversations happen about this little thing where you differ, and they never happen about all the big things that actually you could have the same opinion on, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the examples I just gave, I'm not going to repeat myself.
And that's that's actually kind of a good point, in that a lot of atheists will complain and say, well, religion separates people. It's designed to make people cut each other out from the community. When there's a lot of Christians who don't necessarily believe that. But all the atheists who are saying, I won't speak to a Christian, they're disgusting, they're horrible, I won't listen to what they have to say, aren't they kind of doing exactly the same thing?
Yeah. Shouldn't we be being better? Especially if we atheists often claim that we are better. We are
There's
more
a
moral.
lot. I'm more moral, yeah. I don't follow the Bible, I'm more moral than you. Well, shouldn't you be doing your best to build a community then?
Yeah, most definitely. I sometimes think that we sound like a broken record when we have these sorts of conversations.
Yeah. Well, here's a good example. You'll get a lot of atheists who will say, well, Christianity is against transgenderism. All they want to do is put transgenders in jail. They would kill transgenders. Sophie Grace Chappell is a transgender Christian philosopher.
That is very interesting, actually. I often find people who take those sorts of positions a little bit puzzling, if I'm honest. It's like when you have some really devout homosexual Christians as well. I sometimes find it a bit like, with all the old laws, how do you justify it? But that's the thing. I don't go, well, you're an idiot for being Christian. I go, well, how do you justify it? How do you tally up the differences in your belief? What do you think about this passage? Is it really talking about someone like you, or it's quite a complex one when you actually get to talking to them on this subject as well. I've obviously not talked to a trans Christian, but I have spoken to homosexual Christians on the matter. Generally, with the homosexual Christians, I mean, I'm really, really paraphrasing because these goes on and further and further. They tend to be a little bit more liberal with their belief and talk about how Jesus preached love, and how they think that if you look at even within the Bible, you see the morality evolving, and they think that, well, if you take it from the fire and brimstone days, that's what humans needed to get them set on the right path. But once they were on the right path, and once Jesus was here, you could see that things were actually becoming more about what they should be about, which is about the love and so on and so forth. And they don't think that God would actually be this evil person, and these old rules were there because we needed to multiply to be able to survive, but they're no longer present, much in the way that a lot of the food things in the Old Testament were retconned, because obviously there was unsafe foods back in the day, and then
shellfish lying out in the sun for a few days.
Exactly. And as technology has progressed and the understanding of these foods, and well, you get my point anyway.
Yeah. I just want to address something that Lewis said.
Okay, dokie.
He said, are we sure we're not apologists?
That's great. So hang on. Theists, crypto-theists, and now apologists.
Apologists now?
Yeah, wicked.
Because we don't adopt that fight mentality or everything about religion is bad mentality. We must be apologists. And there's no logical entailment to that argument. So because we don't completely disown them as human beings, we must be one of them.
Yeah.
And that brings into the question, well, are atheists more moral? I mean, we're treating people like human beings and trying to understand why they think the way they do, and saying, they're not worthy of being treated as garbage or like they're mentally ill. Therefore, we must be one of them. Isn't that a very us versus them mentality? And a very, well, they're cockroaches, a very dehumanizing.
Yeah. Do you think that this is a really helpful way to behave as well, like othering us because we're not taking the standard line. I get in America that, which I assume that's where you're from, Lewis, from some of your comments. There are certain areas where religion is a real poison. Creationism is taught in schools, laws are made based on religion, and there are some serious problems. And there are other parts of the world where, there are serious problems caused by Philip. But the whole world's not like that. And even within America, not all theists are like that. There's a lot of liberal theists out there as well that actively argue against these the more fundamentalist types that try and address them, even on theological levels. No, God wanted us to do it this way. They try and talk like look, I'm a theist too, and they get othered by these theists for standing up to them as well, much in the way that you othered us. And this is a problem actually, because all that it really takes to be an atheist is to believe there are no gods, or in fact, colloquially speaking, lacking belief in gods, right? I don't want to get into the definition debate. It's not important.
Well, we fit all those definitions. So
exactly.
If we fit all those definitions, how can we be apologists?
Yeah. But that's all it says about us. Yes, there might be certain entailments that come with atheism. There are quite a lot of atheists that assume that all atheists are going to be humanists. There's quite a lot of quotes about that sort of thing. Now, that's not something that's necessarily entailed in any way, shape, or form, but it's a claim that a lot of atheists make. But if that is true, then why would we other theists? Because isn't the human part the thing that we should be focusing on? And shouldn't we be trying to build a rapport with the theists so that we can eventually have the conversation with them? We can agree on the majority of things, and maybe one day they'll see our point of view. I have had conversations that have gone that way, that over time, through respectful conversation, someone has changed their position on their belief on things like that. It's more unlikely to happen online. And to be honest, that's not my main goal.
No.
I like the conversations. I like understanding why people believe what they believe and exploring these various philosophical topics that we often do. And the conversation is where it's at for me. And you know what? To have a good conversation, you got to treat people like humans as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'll be the first to admit that there are religious harms being caused. I used to argue in the 80s against religious people because Christianity was pretty dominant in the 80s in the UK. And there was a lot of homophobia because of it. I mean, you couldn't teach in schools if you were homosexual back in the 80s. But that's not all religious people. And that's very different in the UK now. I mean, there's people arguing to bring it back, but they're not even gaining traction among Christians in this country.
No. And I think certain states in America as well, those sorts of thoughts wouldn't gain any traction. It tends to be a lot of the southern states that tend to lean that way. I don't know. What is it about the heat that makes people more religious?
Fried brain?
Yeah. LB says that's deep. Homosexual Christians. I mean, is that a euphemism, LB? But yeah, there are some, and do you know what? There are some that really, really, really struggle with it as well. There are some that, there's some that go the bad way with it, and there are some that manage to justify it to themselves and find ways to explain it. And I think these are people that need a lot of heart as well. And I don't think like, oh, you're an idiot because you're a Christian is going to help.
No, not at all.
Um,
It's as helpful to say that as it is for the people writing the questions for atheists to go, well, your beliefs are ridiculous because you believe this thing. How do you explain this thing? Both of those sides are equal to me.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. Icarus. You believe that nothing exploded and created God. Take that, theists. Yeah, that's also not a good one. But I know he's only saying that to make us laugh. Also, pineapple on pizza is Philip's fault.
Yeah, he's Italian. There's no way that's true.
I don't know. Alan says, I love speaking about the Bible and other religious texts. I've taken several university courses on them. As an atheist, I'm absolutely fascinated by what people believe and why they believe it. And that's the exact attitude that I wish more atheists had. And I think that's how we should approach that with theists. And that's in the inverse. I think that's the exact attitude theists should have towards atheists as well. I think these questions that we're talking about tonight, they should be trying to inspire that, you know? What do you believe? Why do you believe it? Can it challenge my beliefs? Can it help? I mean, the thing is, when you look into something, you may change your mind, or you may end up in a stronger position than you were before. If you have a slightly shaky foundation that you didn't realize was shaky, and someone asks a question, and that makes you go, oh my God, I don't know. You can spend a lot of time looking into it. Now, some people might just search for the confirmation bias and just find the one answer that backs up what they already believed. And it's a shame, but, you know. Or you could genuinely look into this. You can say, well, actually, I realize now, having spoken to you, I haven't thought about this anywhere near as much as I ought. Give me some time, and I need to look into it. Do you have anything that, you know, addresses it from your side? And then you read both sides. You read their side, and you read your side, and you go, I discount this because of that, but then I also discount this because of that. And all of a sudden, you're in a much firmer position than you were before. Whether you've changed your mind or you've stayed in the same position, you're in a much stronger state either way.
Well, here's the thing. If somebody comes up to you and gives you an argument, and the best you can say is, well, I don't believe it, and you can't actually give justifications for not believing it, then what right do you have to say it's not rational?
Yeah.
If you can't defeat that argument, what right do you have to say it's not rational?
Yeah. And then that's the same sort of thing of, well, there's no evidence for it. Okay, so what's your understanding of evidence?
Yeah.
Okay, and here's some evidence that shows that evidence isn't just scientific evidence. Do you accept this evidence? Well, no, it's not scientific evidence.
Yeah. If at best all you can do is suspend judgment on it, then the most you can say is it's rational to suspend judgment on it, not that the argument is irrational. And it might not even be rational for them to suspend judgment on it, because who knows, they could be a slightly better thinker than you.
I mean, to be honest, I reckon most people are a better thinker than me.
And me. I mean, I've got minions and arcade machines on the top of my shelves. That shows how bad of a thinker I am.
Yeah, and I've got Dragon Ball Z memorabilia right at the back that I haven't hung up yet, and Star Wars posters all around. You can't see them because I've not hung them yet. Yeah. Oh yeah, and I don't know if I've showed these off before, but my drinks coasters.
Nice.
Hear them out.
Nice one. Awesome. Well, we already know that Luke is irrational because he's in the chat kind of arguing for pineapple on pizza. So that excludes him from rationality.
Yeah. The law of excluded pineapple.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it, Luke. Can't be my friend anymore. I am mirrored. Yeah, I thought that was the case. And it is Philip's fault. Yes! Can I change it? I always thought that it was. Because it doesn't come through backwards to you, does it, Dave?
Not on the Discord, no.
No, but it does.
But what's actually happening is that the one on YouTube is the evil Joe.
I wonder if I can flip it. Or if it'll flip both of us. Then you'll be backwards. Oh no, it's just too much. Too much. Flip horizontal. There you go.
I think I'm backwards on YouTube anyway.
Oh, you shouldn't be. No, I can read the censored on mine. There you go. Am I the right way around now, okay. Icarus? No longer Mirror Universe Joe. In fact, having done this, it now means that my t-shirts that I wear should come in the right way round. The only problem's going to be is if someone else takes this spot. But yeah. Hey Salem, nice to have you here. I hope you do enjoy this one this weekend. And if you've got any comments, let us know. I am interested in any comments that you've got about it. I mean, the general conversation has been about how we can have better conversations as theists and atheists, and I think that's something that we should be striving for, and how to locate those bad faith actors, and both on the theist and the atheist side. And the general consensus seems to be that we should be looking for asking questions that might actually challenge what we believe, not asking questions that makes the other person look stupid. And there's been a number of other things discussed tonight, obviously, but I just figured as you just popped in briefly, I'd give you the skinny.
Yeah. Well, you can't actually give a skinny on this channel. We're both kind of tubby.
Yeah, that's true. Here's something interesting. Faith is following an ignorant theistic host through gratuitous, overdone dialogue by God with just enough silly, useless sayings through Jesus. I tend to disagree with that. Faith is essentially just trust.
Remember what I said on my video about terrible atheist catchphrases?
I have seen that one come up a couple of times before. Thinking about this, right? Faith is essentially trust. Even in the Bible, it's the Greek pistis, which was the personification of good faith, trust, and hope, or something like that. Sorry, I forget the exact phrasing. But the whole point is faith in many situations is used as just trust. If I say I have faith in my friend, I have trust in my friend. If I say I have faith that I wake up tomorrow, I trust that I'm going to wake up tomorrow. If you have faith in your particular sports team, it means you have trust and you believe in them. So faith isn't just that. You might think of that from theists, but then I'd suggest that you're talking to the wrong theists if you think that it's all an ignorant theistic host. Don't get me wrong, I believe it false, but I think that that's not necessarily the best way to go with the conversation either. And we're just having a conversation about great ways that we can talk to theists and theists can talk to us, and I think that's an example of a way that you probably won't get a good response from a theist, but you might get pats on the backs from people who are of the same mindset as you.
Slogans like that are good for marketing, but not actually demonstrative of anything strong.
Yeah,
apart from the gullibility of those who actually buy into the
catchphrases. Philip's response. But Joe, it's there in the acronym.
and it's on the internet, so it must be true.
Cafe says Ricky Gervais is the epitome of terrible atheist catchphrases. I mean, if you're going to get your philosophy from a comedian, then you can expect it to be a joke.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, every now and then he might have a point that if you were to expand on it, might be okay. You know, you could. So let's take one that he goes with that is a terrible catchphrase, and it goes along the lines of most theists are almost as atheist as me. I just don't believe in one God less, or something like that.
I go one God further, or something like that.
And that is a terrible catchphrase because obviously, regardless of how you define atheism, theism is believing in at least one God. So they've got plenty of justification. And because they believe in this one God, maybe, there is justification for not believing in any of the others. And actually disbelieving in them. But what you could do is cross-reference. You know, take what he says there with a pinch of salt and say, well, what was it that convinced you that, you know, this religion was false? Now, they might come along, well, because I'm convinced that my religion is true. That's probably going to be the response. But at least it's a better question than that catchphrase.
Well, I mean, you could make that one kind of symmetrical and go, well, you're almost as theist as me. I'd just go one God further.
Yeah, you could. I only lack belief in a God not existing.
Yeah.
Brina says, you guys are streaming so much more now. I'm late, but I was looking for something to put on in the background whilst I hang up my clothes.
Hey, Brina.
Nice to have you, Brina. Yes, we're back to streaming twice a week again. We had a bit of a hiatus because of my move and babies and all of
my meltdown over having 12 assignments to hand in all at the same time and exams and
so. Hopefully, we're back streaming regularly. It should be twice a week. There might be the odd time here and there where it's only once a week. Although we don't know how busy you're going to get, do we, Dave?
Well, no. I mean, I don't have any actual uni now until like February, so
hopefully we can be pretty stable till then. Just carrying on. Yeah. So Kimmo says, T-shirts, bumper stickers, and fortune cookies are the only reliable path to a sound epistemology. This is a good point, though. Like we're talking about with the catchphrases. Unfortunately, there are so many takes like this that do take like the t-shirts and bumper sticker approach, and both from theists and atheists. It's both camps that do this sort of thing. We're not just talking about one camp or another, and the catchphrases are terrible. And again, they won't build a good conversation. And if you're not looking to have a good conversation, then why are you conversing at all? Is it an ego thing? I do see this happen a lot. There are a lot of atheists on Twitter, for example, that outright bully theists. They find them and they dogpile on them. And do you know what? I've seen theists do it too, but I don't actually see theists doing it quite as much as I do see atheists doing it.
But you are situated in a different context.
Exactly. So. And I have heard theists who are of a similar mind to us say it the other way around. So, you know... we are, I guess, people that look at the bad sides and of our own camp, and we want to improve the thinking of our own camp desperately.
Well, it's part of good critical thinking.
Yes, yeah, most definitely. Alan says, as long as our intentions are to genuinely gain new and different perspectives, you're on the right path.
Yeah.
I think that's right. I think listening to different perspectives can teach you a lot. Sometimes it can teach you what not to think. It can. It can. But if you actually learn how people came to hold the beliefs that they have and the way they think, it can help you realize that the people around you all think differently. Even those that might have the same beliefs as you, they think about them in a different way. They've justified them in a different way. And you can start having better conversations, even with your own in-group, because you realize that maybe they don't think the same. So, why do you believe gods don't exist? Or why do you only lack belief in gods? Or are there any gods that you will say you believe don't exist, but, you're generally agnostic towards the others? And why do you prefer this definition, and so on and so forth? You can have these conversations, and you can realize that there are different justifications. I mean, there are some people that prefer the lack of belief definition of atheism because that's how it's generally discussed online within their social circle. So they find it easy to use it that way, and they appreciate maybe in a more academic circle it wouldn't be used that way. Fine. I mean, I don't care what people actually use. The only thing I care about is when people are prescriptive with their definitions. But hearing the fact that, they've actually got quite a good justification for using it in this environment, you can go, okay, so, maybe not all lack of belief atheists are these irrational things that are influenced by the American atheists and so on and so forth. Actually, not all of the lack of belief atheists are those irrational fundamentalist type atheists. There are some that have a genuine good rationale for using this definition. It makes sense. And that's what we need to do. We need to get these understandings of each other for all the different positions.
Oh, yeah. And here's something I can say sort of about those attitudes where it's just yell at the other person. Don't engage with them, just yell at them and scare them away. If you are confident enough in what you believe, then you shouldn't really have any problem having a discussion with somebody who can challenge what you think.
That's true.
And if you are worried about being challenged and maybe you'll change your mind, then perhaps you're putting a bit too much into your identity. You're assuming that as your identity rather than believing that thing because you have these arguments that lead you to that conclusion.
I have actually wondered something similar myself in the past. Those who have been through it, those who have been heavily indoctrinated, who have been in a really religious community, who even leaving religion still feel that pull, that they just because it's habit forming. They can't help it, but there's something that they keep questioning, they keep doubting, they keep that they've left their faith and so on and so forth. And they don't feel particularly strong in their position. Maybe part of the reason is because they now see the theist groups that they were once part of as being these irrational things. They're so afraid to fall back into that path and be an irrational thing that they just don't listen at all. And that's why they go into the fight mentality and, no, I'm not listening to you, you're just wrong, so on and so forth. I don't know if that's true for everyone, but I think there's a high possibility that could be the case. I think an example from myself was I was briefly, a couple of months I think, convinced by someone about the whole anti-vax propaganda. And I was even dumber than I am now, and I was a hell of a lot younger than I am right now, and new parent and so on and so forth. And someone that I trusted basically started saying these things, and they said them in ways. Anyway, they managed to convince me. There's an article about it, one of my first articles on Answers in Reason, about how it happened. But I realized a behavior that happened in me after then spending the time doing as good research as I could, which isn't proper research. It was reading the scientific papers. That's as much as I can do. I'm not a scientist. I'm not trained in virology. But I accepted the expert opinion and read a few different things on it and realized how wrong I was with the things I've been convinced of. I was then really aggressive to other anti-vaxxers. But I wasn't aggressive because of them. I was aggressive because I felt stupid in myself. I was embarrassed of that. And I almost was being really aggressive to them to try and break all ties with the fact that I briefly held this incredibly irrational position that I'm still embarrassed of. And the reason I keep talking about it is because I'm trying to normalize it in my own head. You know what? I was wrong. And it's, every time I do talk about it and tell you guys about this thing that, I was really wrong about this thing, it helps. It helps it because at least I can look back and go, I've made progress since then. But the thing that I note is this negative behavior that I had. And you know what? Sometimes it still happens. When there's a group of anti-vaxxers, I still find myself getting so wound up. Now imagine being indoctrinated from a young age and being in a really, really religious community for, I don't know, say 20 years, and then breaking out of that. I mean, my experience was from a couple of months. They've had, say, 20 years. I can understand why they're so aggressive. Now, understanding something is not excusing it. Explaining something is not excusing it. I can explain the behavior, but what I hope to reach with some of us atheists is the understanding that they are demonstrating these negative behaviors and to try and get them to watch themselves and correct them. And they'll slip up. I do all the time still, but
I do.
It's acknowledging the fact that there is this negative behavior and realizing that you're not going to reach an anti-vaxxer by telling them they're a fucking idiot and they don't know what they're talking about. And you know what? You're not going to reach a theist by telling them they're a fucking idiot and they don't know what they're talking about. And actually, a lot of theists have a much better understanding of philosophy, and there's a large portion that have a better understanding of science than a lot of the atheists out there. And that's the funny thing. I mean, so many atheists are really scientistic. That means they adhere to scientism. And and they almost deify it, essentially. Which is quite a funny one because they start making these ideological claims about science, and the theist will turn around and go, well, that's not what science does. Science does this. You don't know science because you're a theist.
Yeah. And what you said about being wrong and hating the fact that you were wrong and all that kind of stuff. I mean, to be honest, I think that shows growth. Like, I can understand why it would be a sore spot for you, and I can understand why going from theist to atheist might be a bit of a sore spot, especially with the way it's talking about. But owning up to the fact that you were wrong is something that shows intellectual growth. And there's the common catchphrase that you hear among a lot of atheists. I love being wrong and being shown I'm wrong because it means I've learned something new. But we often see the opposite of the behavior, where if it's shown that they're wrong, they dig their heels in or block you or, stuff like that.
Mm.
But I think it's good when people can admit they're wrong. It's intellectual growth. It's how intellectual growth happens. Sure, it might take a while to admit it. Sure, it might be painful. It happens to me, but being wrong can be good, and owning up to it is good.
It definitely can. And I agree that it is good, but it doesn't stop the negative feelings that you might have along with those things.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. We're human. I know a lot of people say logic and all that, but, emotions rule a huge part of us. and they affect how we view ourselves, how we view others, that kind of thing.
I think they definitely interfere with rationality as well, don't they?
Oh, yeah. As we said on our stream about rationality.
Hello, Pondering Soul. Nice to see you. He says, I'm reading Thomas Kuhn at the moment. Covers a whole process of scientific exploration and development really well. And actually, we were doing a stream on Thomas Kuhn at one point, weren't we? Although we ended up not covering much at all. We got really sidetracked and had a completely different conversation.
We could always go back to it.
Yeah, might be one. I mean, I've not read Kuhn myself, but it was the scientific revelations and revolutions. That's the one. Yeah. And I think, it's great to explore science and the philosophy of science. I think this is one of the funny things as well. There are many of us atheists that will reject philosophy and even the philosophy of science and not realize that without the philosophy of science wouldn't be as good as it is.
As I've heard somewhere recently, the only good philosophy is the philosophy of science, and it comes from the physics department.
Yeah, that was terrible. Not actually realizing that the philosophy of science is a genuine philosophy and has probably put a lot of influence into, things like physics and the entire method. But, Pondering Soul says that ended up doing that in their book club, ended up just a conversation about what we mean by world and how people can have different worlds. Interesting. That sounds like... was that recorded at all, Pondering Soul? Because that sounds like a very interesting conversation.
I just had a thought. Pondering Soul, are you from the Thought Adventure podcast? I can't remember. I seem to remember a name similar to that having something to do with the Thought Adventure podcast.
If so, hello and welcome. And if not, hello and welcome. But yeah, if you are from TAP, you just chat on Discord. Fair. They're good guys. Oh yeah, he's from TAP. Yeah.
Welcome.
You guys
we
are
enjoy
awesome.
Your content.
Yeah, you're really great. Question from Salem as well. Are you guys on Facebook? Yes, if you look up Answers in Reason, there's both a page and a group. If you go into the group, then you can find both Dave and myself. We're both admins there, and we will very much welcome you there. We do have a debate group there. We try and keep things having better conversations, like we're trying to do tonight, is talk about better ways to have conversations between theists and atheists. That's the same sort of thing that we try and do in the group, but it doesn't always go that way.
Yeah. And speaking of TAP, there's a lot of atheists who will say, I'm tired of all the low-hanging fruit. I'm tired of all the same arguments. Go to Thought Adventure podcast. You'll get a much better discussion than you will with the Ray Comforts and the Frank Turek's.
But then we're probably in the situation where they're worried that they might actually be convinced.
Yeah.
I mean, that even happened, didn't it? That's what happened to Khalil.
I was going to say, especially as they stole Khalil from our side. How dare they?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what happens, though. I think so many of us atheists are used to that low-hanging fruit, those really bad, I think, as LB used to say, funded jellicles. That have those really basic arguments, and they want a better conversation, or they say they want a better conversation. And then, they actually get presented decent content, and sorry, you're right, Dave.
No, it's all right. It's the dog's barking downstairs,
okay.
But Emma's going to go down and get him.
It's all right. We can end soon if you need to, Dave.
No, it's all good.
So Icarus says, better ways to have debates between theists and atheists. Step one, delete Twitter. Yeah, I mean, I would actually say the best way to have a debate between theists and atheists, don't have a conversation. Because a debate has the connotation of fight mentality. And screw the fight mentality, man. We're all humans. As I said, there can be so many more things that we have together that we agree on. And okay, obviously, religious beliefs do influence certain opinions. Fine, they do. But all of our beliefs influence all of our other opinions as well. So that's irrelevant. Try and have conversations about the things you agree on. Like I had earlier with the creationist guy, we have a really good rapport. We ignore the fact that, you know, he's a young Earth creationist and talk about all the other stuff. And I think that is a much better way to go. Have a good conversation with people. And yeah, occasionally we challenge each other. But in general, the conversation is a lot more fruitful.
It is. And what a lot of people seem to forget is that religion isn't this monolithic entity. And not even any one particular religion is a monolithic entity. There's a lot of variety in beliefs in those people that belong to those various different religions. There may be core concepts, but that doesn't mean everybody interprets them the same way or believes the same thing.
Yeah, most definitely. Apparently Pondering Soul found our channel because of the Khalil drama that kicked off when he became Muslim. Yeah, that was awful. I mean,
It was.
I'd like to apologize for all the atheists, but, you know, I can't. Philip says, yeah, talking about tap. You guys are still wrong, but at least you are while owning Aaron Ra in style. And that's great, actually. that video, you guys did absolutely Aaron Ra. But this is the thing that we're talking about with echo chambers as well, right? Coming away from that video, Aaron Ra got so many pats on the backs, and he's whether it was in a post or it was in a video, he was like, yeah, well, when I got home, all my fans were, he said, paraphrasing obviously, told me how good I was in it and so on and so forth. Yeah. You're idolized. I don't know why. Your philosophical takes are terrible. You're great at a lot of the science stuff. You are. I have a hell of a lot of respect for that. And your work that you've done keeping creationism out of schools, fine, absolutely fantastic. But whenever you get into a philosophical or sometimes theological debate, absolutely terrible. You're really out of your depth, but you never look to learn more because you have this echo chamber telling you that you're great and you're right because you're Aaron Ra.
Yeah, I think this sort of goes to, like, remember me talking about Muller's propheticity? I think that's something that kind of goes to that with somebody like Aaron Ra. He has a profile that he has to keep up and an image that he has to keep up. So it feeds into, like, he knows it's going to be reinforced by his fans. So he knows he doesn't really need to change. He doesn't actually need to win a debate because his fans will tell him he did anyway. And if he ever admits that he's wrong or didn't do well, then his fans might abandon that profile.
It's all aesthetics.
It is.
Icarus, do young Earth creationists grow up to be old Earth creationists? Brilliant. Salem, yes, that's exactly a point that we brought up earlier. You say, I think sometimes we focus on our disagreements that we sometimes forget how much we agree on other issues. And I think you're absolutely right there. It's one of the things that is a massive, massive problem in all of the communities. We always focus on atheist versus theist. Okay, well, if you really think about it, regardless of what your definitions are, but let's just use the colloquial atheism, you don't believe in God, and theism, you believe in at least one God, right? It's a position on one topic. Yes, that might influence other beliefs that you have depending on where you stand on that. But there are so many things. We're all living on this world together, and most of us, I think, all want a better world for everybody. So let's not focus on those little differences. Let's focus on what we can do to make the world better, and let's find justifications for how these things we think are going to make the world better, the things that actually do. Pondering Soul says, I think that's the problem with YouTube culture in general. I wouldn't say just YouTube culture. I'd say social media in general. Problem everywhere. But
yeah, I think.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, one of the things that people have to remember is that the YouTube community isn't isolated. There's a whole ecosystem of Discord servers, YouTube channels, Facebook groups, Twitter PMs, not Twitter PMs, like Twitter profiles and stuff like that, that all kind of feed into a kind of ecosystem itself.
Yeah. It's, yeah, he says though, yeah, people like drama though. They do. The channels that cause the most drama, cause the most ruckus, are generally the most successful.
And that's one of the things about atheism, and one of the things we hope to discuss in the future is how it's something of a commodity. It's a product that's marketed and sold, and people are fighting for control of the market. So they're performing and they're looking to get the most subscribers and the most donations and the most Patreons. So that feeds into it as well.
Most definitely. And I suppose with the comments we make, no wonder people think that we're actually crypto-theist apologists, cult leaders.
Yeah.
So is there anything else that you think we need to cover tonight? I think we covered off the bulk of what we set out to do.
No, it's been a good discussion. I think we've covered quite a lot of topics.
Yeah, so just to cover off for people, we had a discussion tonight, starting with the 10 questions for atheist type videos and blog posts and all of that. And we had a discussion of, are these questions being asked in good faith, and how can we tell the difference between the good faith questions and gotchas? And a lot of that is, if they're questions that are being asked in a way which, basically lead the atheist to say, well, I don't know, and someone can go, well, therefore God. That's probably a gotcha. Whereas if they're good questions that actually could challenge the theist position itself, then maybe they are acting in good faith. We can obviously learn from these types of questions about the way different people think, and the way we think ourselves. Perhaps that we don't have as good knowledge as we thought we did, and we can maybe strengthen our position or spend time looking into it, or even change our position. There are some theists out there that genuinely seem to care about what atheists think and believe, and there are others that don't really care and are operating on catchphrases. And we've said the same. Everything we've said about theists tonight, we've said in reverse as well, haven't we, Dave? That atheists do this too. It is quite even between the groups. We also discussed some better ways people can ask the questions. We covered off a couple of good questions that theists could ask atheists, or the way they could ask them, but we didn't go too much into detail there. Probably could do with some more thought on that section, really. But yeah, as you say, Dave, all in all, it's been generally a good chat. We did get called apologists tonight.
Yeah.
Because we were saying we shouldn't be dicks to theists, and we shouldn't operate on the same atheistic catchphrases, and that atheist echo chambers are bad. Basically,
bumper stickers full of acronyms.
So yeah, just catching up with some of the last messages before we going. Salem says, a lot of my classmates are YEC and pretty fundamentalist, but honestly, it doesn't bother me considering most of them are really awesome, loving people and are going to do social justice. Yeah, brilliant. I don't think just because you might agree with the YEC on the young Earth and the creationism, or maybe just the young Earth side of things, however you disagree with them, it doesn't mean that they're a bad person and that they're irrational in any other aspect other than like this particular one. And really, if they happen to believe the Earth is 6,000 years old, but they're actually a really good person and they do a lot of good deeds and they seem to, be quite progressive, then what does it matter? We've all got false beliefs. We've all got them. We can't help it.
I believe I'm smart. That's a false belief right there.
Damn, we both suffer a false belief there then. I believe you're smart too.
Damn it, that's a false belief.
So yeah, Salem, I agree with everything what you're saying there. It doesn't bother you. They don't understand evolutionary biology or the dating methods or anything like that. And it doesn't really matter. In the grand scheme of things, unless they're using that belief as a reason to be a dick, then obviously address it. But I think you tend to find most people, regardless of their ontological position, tend to be quite good people. And maybe we should spend time focusing on that aspect and the things where we cross over and we can enrich each other's lives, even if we do disagree on some foundational levels.
And I mean, isn't that one of the points of secularism, where all people of all different kinds of belief can live together in kind of a peace and harmony and work together to make society better?
You'd think. Pondering Soul says, something has happened to me where I can't distinguish southern accents and northern accents anymore. Now, I assume you're speaking in America, because they're quite different in the UK.
Yeah, by gum, lad.
You're starting.
All right, mate. You looking for a kick in the teeth? All right, our kid.
And then down south, we've got, people that sound like me. You've got like people that talk like this a bit more like, innit? Yeah, bruv. You got them from Somerset and Dorset.
Yeah.
So there's quite a vast number of accents in such a small space in the UK, whereas in America you've got basically 3 or 4 accents across these 50-something states.
Amish, New Yorker, Texan, and everybody else.
Yeah. Oh no, he was actually talking about English. He thought I was Northern. Yeah, I'm very much not Northern.
You can tell that because you drink shandy.
No, I'm from Bournemouth now, so I drink cider.
Cider.
Proper stuff as well. But no, my accent is from Surrey. I did live in America for a year, so occasionally I have a little bit of an American twang. Certain words I say, it comes out. I don't speak like the average chav, even though I was born in Croydon. But yeah. Prince Vegeta, what blood? Yeah, blood, man. It's a banging tune. You should have been here earlier. You missed the mix, yeah? You travel with a lad from Surrey. Well, I'm sorry. That was one of those things when whenever I travel to a non-English speaking place, and they always ask you where you're from, and you go, Surrey. Where are you from? Surrey. No, I'm saying where you from. Sorry, do you want to write it down? No, I am from Surrey.
Try doing that with Welsh place names. People go, what?
Yeah. Excuse you? Llandudno. You sneezing?
Llandudno.
Or that really, really, really long one. I mean, it does just sound like you're clearing your throat, doesn't it?
It does.
The one thing I do like about Welsh is the occasional word that's really similar to English. Like the word bus, except instead of a U, it's got a W. And said as if it was two U's next to each other, rather than how you'd usually say with, as you say, bus. Fantastic.
Yeah. Or the words are the same but spelt very different. Like sorry, instead of being spelt SORRY, it's SORI.
I can take that though. It's basically a language that would have probably suited me as a dyslexic.
Well, the one handy thing about Welsh is that it's phonetic, and that every word is spelt exactly as it sounds.
Except for the double L's.
No, because the double L is the sound.
Yeah. Yeah. But it isn't. From an English speaking.
Yeah, but what do English people know?
Not much, this is true.
Most English people voted to leave Europe. I discount them when it comes to any kind of thoughtful things.
I would definitely discount us. I just catch it up on the chat again. Kimo says, I thought all English folk talk like the ones on Coronation Street.
Fun fact, I used to till I was about 5.
Oh, really?
Because I'm a Manc by birth.
Can you still speak like that?
Not really. Best I can do is like, all right, kid. Yeah, all right.
Pondering Soul says, my sorry friend had to translate my English into English because my accent was a little extra Manc back in the day. That's fair. I mean, I must admit, I sometimes really struggle with accents in the UK. It's amazing how different the language can be, because it's not just the accent. There's also the slight dialectical thing that's going on between each of the areas, and the different phrases that come out that make complete sense to anyone in that area. But you know, you go over an hour or two's drive, and all of a sudden you're just speaking a foreign language.
Yeah, there's so many accents in Britain that you can have one city with 12 different accents.
Yeah, you definitely can. Cool. Okay. Well, we're going on to movies and things like that now, and definitely agree with some of the suggestions that are coming out. There's a lot of good Korean and Japanese shows that are coming out on Netflix at the moment. I'm sure everybody's seen Squid Game, but you mentioned The Kingdom. I haven't watched that one yet, Dave, but I do mean to get round to it. I've now finished.
It's amazing.
Alice in Borderland. It got better. I know you got bored after a second episode, didn't you? I had it on as a background piece whilst I was doing other things, and it did get better. I did enjoy it in the end.
Okay, I'll give it another try.
The dialogue was a bit basic, though.
Oh, yeah, the effects look good though. At the moment, I'm watching a show called Uncanny Counter. Have you ever seen the TV show Reaper?
No.
Where it was the kid hired by the devil to track down demons that had escaped from hell?
No, I don't think I have.
Oh, that was really good. And this Uncanny Counter is kind of like the Korean version of that.
Oh, nice.
Where you've got these guys who are revived, and guys and women who are revived from comas so that they can go out and hunt demons that have possessed people on Earth. It's cool.
Yeah, it sounds awesome. See, and I mean, that's another thing. I mean, there might be some atheists out there that are very, very like anti-religion, but without religion, we wouldn't have as much great horror as we do. So there's benefits to everything. Right, well, I think tonight has been a really enjoyable conversation. Really appreciate everybody that has joined in the chat as well.
Even Lewis.
Yeah, no, Lewis, I mean, I don't mind disagreeing with you. That's not the point. I think you were a little bit unfair to call us an apologist, but you know what? We've had a lot
just
worse.
Another one to add. Yeah, it's just another one to add to the list.
Obviously, Dave, thank you always for being there. And to everybody who is catching this on the rerun or the podcast or anything like that, thank you all very much for taking the time to listen to us blather on about 10 questions for atheists and different ways that theists and atheists could interact with each other and have better conversations.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thank you for everyone joining us. And welcome, Pondering Soul. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, yeah, especially welcome to those of you who are new to the stream tonight, or at least new to the live stream. I know you said you caught us before, but yeah, thank you so much for dropping in. We really enjoy the interaction, so
yeah,
cheers. So,
and like I said, oh, hang on, one more thing. Atheists who are complaining about bad conversations, go take a look at Thought Adventure Podcast.
Most definitely, absolutely, go do it right now. I will even try and remember to put a card in up here, or it'll probably appear over there, with a link to the channel if I can. But I tend to forget when I say I'm going to do that, so just FYI. Anyway,
link to the Aaron Raw run, just to be controversial.
Oh yes, that was amazing. So you've been watching the Fresh Air Sci-Fi show. I'm Joe.
I'm Dave. Sorry, I was reading the chat. I saw Welshman pop up and I thought, what?
Have yourselves a good night.
Good night all.